The days are getting wonderfully long. Flowers are in bloom everywhere. School is winding down and you're looking forward to your summer break. But in this particular instance, with our particular 16-year-old boy, there is a dark cloud on the horizon. Seems there's a political movement that's created quite a stir where he is. It goes by the name the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. Does anybody resonate with this name? It is known more generally by the first two initials of that long mouthful of title, Nationaal, because our 16-year-old, it happens, is in Holland. The year is 1940, and the Nazis are wreaking havoc. Holland is a small country. It's declared politically neutral, but they are ill-equipped to defend themselves should the Germans decide to disregard that neutrality. And in May 10th of 1940, that is exactly what happens. The Germans invade Holland, defying the neutrality, and after a 5-day bloody skirmish, Holland is converted from an independent state to an occupied territory. Now, what does this mean for our man in question? Well, fortunately for him, he is able, despite current circumstances, to resume his life much the way he has been. He's able to continue his schooling. Things, of course, are more tense, but he is able to complete high school, and that's as far as he can go at the moment. Universities are shut down during World War II in Holland because they refused to swear an allegiance to the Third Reich. Meanwhile, men of working age are being conscripted to work in German war factories. Now, our young man finished high school, now 19 years old, has an ace in the hole. Son of Austrian immigrants, he speaks fluent German, and he is therefore able to make himself useful to the local administration and avoid conscription. As well as that, he is also able to listen in and pick up bits of information, because pretty much everyone in Holland who isn't a sympathizer, and that's a relative few, works for the Dutch resistance. And he's able to eventually pass information to an agent that he knows and in a small way assist the resistance effort. He's also able to convince the superiors that he works with that the people that he's working with need bicycles to do the work that they've been asked to do. These bicycles are then surreptitiously used by couriers to also ferry information that's of use to the resistance. So in his own small way, he is able to fight the war against the Germans, and this war eventually comes to a close. So we're at 1945. He has survived the onslaught of war. He has not been conscripted. He survived the Hunger Winter of 1944, which was a particularly cold winter, speaking of cold. And at the time, the Dutch were cut off from food and fuel as a retribution from the Germans. And many of his countrymen died of starvation and exposure to the elements. He, fortunately, though he was hungry, did not perish. And so, after the conclusion of the war, was able to continue with his life. So he entered university, studied to be an engineer. During his time in university, he had the opportunity to travel to the United States. And having made this trip, he fell in love with the United States. What he found was plentiful beef, ice and drinks, air conditioning, and cheap cigarettes. And he said, "This is the place for me." So he goes back to school and asks the professor if he can work out an arrangement and set him up. And this professor gets him in touch with the company by the name of Nederlandse Kunst. Just a moment. This escapes me. Right. Nederlandse Kunstje de Fabriek. Now, does this resonate with anyone? The initials NK, pronounced in Dutch, sound like Enka. So our man, after graduating from school, accepted a position with American Enka in a little company town outside of Asheville, North Carolina. On his way there, he meets a woman named, a woman in Boston, speaking of Boston, and manages to convince her, even though she's prepared for a career, to drop all that and move to Asheville with him and start a family, which they do. He starts his career at American Enka and moves up through the ranks predictably. And in the course of his profession, there is an incident, which is a footnote in history, but of significance, which I think you'll understand. In 1962, there was a wildcat strike at Enka. Strikes were dangerous, and he spent a long time at the plant, keeping the plant functioning, and while labor was negotiating with management to find a settlement. Well, they settled, and a much relieved husband returned to his much relieved wife for the comforts of home. 9 months later, I guess I'll stop.
Take a moment, write your